You're questioning the past and you're wondering why. Time to check out History High.
Welcome back to History High. This video is one from a series of 4 overview videos that looks at crimes, law enforcement and punishments across the last millennium, aimed at the Crime and Punishment GCSE. This video looks at the medieval period, but because it's only an overview, you do need to make sure you use your revision notes and textbooks to add to your knowledge after watching this. You also need to know the 5 purposes of punishment: RR, retribution, removal, deterrence, restitution, and reform. You can remember this with the mnemonic, real rappers don't really run, because it's true. Have you ever seen a good rapper run? They don't run anywhere. Even Run DMC, Walk This Way. The medieval period lasted from around circa 1000 to circa 1500. That little C at the beginning there just means circa, which means approximately. For example, if someone asks you, have you finished your homework? You might say, yes, circa 10 minutes ago. It can be split into 3 smaller periods: the Anglo-Saxon period, the Normans, and the later Middle Ages. By the end of this video, you should be able to give examples of crimes and punishments in this period, and also be able to explain what changed and what stayed the same. First, let's look at crimes in the medieval period. In 1000, the population of England was around 2 million, and 90% of people lived in the countryside. Most crime was petty theft, stealing money, food, or belongings. Violent crimes were only a minority of cases, and local community ties were strong. The most serious crimes were any that attacked the king's authority, such as rebellions, protests, or attacking royal officials. Rebellions increased when the Normans conquered England in 1066, and there were also rebellions in the later Middle Ages after the chaos of the Black Death. For example, the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. New crimes were also created, such as poaching, when William I introduced his forest laws after 1066. Being an outlaw, so leaving your community ties, was also forbidden. Now let's think about law enforcement. First of all, there was no police force. That's a relatively modern idea. Law enforcement was based around the local community. This was known as collective responsibility. If you were a victim of crime, you'd simply call for help, and fellow villagers would try to help you catch the criminal. They would raise what was known as a hue and cry. Local communities also dealt with justice. Adult men were grouped into tens called tithings. These tithings were responsible for bringing people to justice if they broke the law. There were also local juries which helped to decide guilt or innocence, but if the jury by ordeal was asked to give it a go. This was known as trial by ordeal. Trials by ordeal included trial by hot water, trial by cold water, and trial by hot iron. In the Norman period, they also added trial by combat to this as a way of finding out guilt or innocence. As time went on, parish constables were chosen from the leading villages to help keep order, and more major crimes might be investigated by coroners or sheriffs. The accused might even be brought in front of a royal judge who travelled the country. Each manor had its own court, held by the local lord, often once a week, dealing with less serious cases. Finally, what punishments were used in this period? Well, prisons were not used, and if you were locked up, it was only temporarily before awaiting trial. In the Anglo-Saxon period, only a few crimes carried the death penalty, and whether or not you got the death penalty was really up to chance. In other words, it depended on where you lived. Often criminals would have to pay compensation to their victims or families. Wergild was a compensation paid in Anglo-Saxon times that was meant to avoid a blood feud where families would seek revenge for murder by killing the perpetrator. This could end up in a cycle of murders. By 1100, punishments were more about retribution and deterrence, with executions and corporal punishment used more frequently. When the Normans invaded, the murderum fine was introduced as a punishment and a way of stopping Normans from being attacked by Anglo-Saxons. This was used when a Norman was murdered, and if the murderer wasn't caught, the whole community would be forced to pay a fine. Punishments such as stock and pillory and maiming also existed for less serious crimes. Finally, in the later Middle Ages, a new and brutal punishment was introduced for the most serious crime of high treason. A person was hanged, drawn and quartered. He would be semi-strangled, then his abdomen cut open and his intestines drawn out. After his death, his limbs would be toured around the country to deter others from challenging the power of the king. Lovely. So, in summary, most crime was petty theft, but new crimes such as poaching or being an outlaw also emerged in this period. Local communities were really important, but as the medieval period went on, the authority of the king and his officials also grew. Centralised systems for law enforcement were developed, with jobs like coroners and sheriffs emerging. Finally, the purpose of punishments tended to be deterrence and public humiliation. But for serious crimes such as treason, you could get the death penalty, or be hanged, drawn and quartered. For more information on how society was structured at this time, please check out the feudal system video, link in description. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.
So if you're questioning the past,